So I've spent a little bit of time today getting used to the Sony FX5 and getting used to the Sony system again in general. As I said before, I'm switching from primarily shooting on the Canon system, the C50, the R6 Mark III, the C80 as well behind me here, to moving back to the Sony system. And I have discovered a couple of not entirely unexpected, but certainly things I haven't heard spoken about before with regards to mainly the recording options on the FX5. So obviously the kind of standout feature is this combination of RAW and OpenGate on the FX5. However, you can only record to one card in RAW. I haven't seen this mentioned in any of the forums or the Reddit boards or any of the other reviews from the YouTube guys who got the camera early. Now, I don't know if I missed it and that information was there or whether it's just not really been mentioned. But in terms of like a working professional, that's a big thing to know. And I've spoken to another couple of people who maybe don't already have the camera, but also didn't know that this was a limitation in the recording ability of the camera. There is a promised firmware update. Now, Sony are good at firmware updates. I don't think there's any real concern there with the camera not being updated in the future. However, in order to bring the OpenGate feature to the more compressed codecs, the non-RAW codecs, to unlock dual recording of OpenGate. We're filming in OpenGate now. I love OpenGate. It makes a lot of sense to me as a framing tool. To have to wait for a year, potentially, to unlock the ability to dual record OpenGate, that's a disappointment. And it's fine. It's absolutely fine. You can make it work. You don't need to shoot an OpenGate with this camera. Like, this camera doesn't need to be my A camera. Initially, I have the FX3 that I understand a little bit better than this FX5. However, I think for a lot of people it would be good to know before you make that purchase that this FX5 doesn't allow you to dual record in RAW or in OpenGate. So not being able to simultaneously record on two cards, I'm not going to go as far as to say it's a deal breaker for some, but it's certainly a consideration for how you use this camera in a professional setting. If you're planning to use this camera as your main A-cam for run and gun video work, weddings, documentary work, events, things that can't be repeated, there's no retakes of these things, the ability to have dual recording, being able to record the same file onto both cards simultaneously, is a major comforting factor in choosing your camera. Now, I picked up the FX5 because it's new, but also because of the OpenGate features. Not so much the RAW codecs. The RAW codecs are nice. I've shot in RAW before, and the flexibility in post is a lot of fun. However, it's not really required. So we're currently recording in X-OCN C2 in OpenGate on a V60 SD card. When you put that V60 SD card in the camera in this recording format, you get a message that comes up and says this is not guaranteed media. I had a look at the Who Is Matt cheat sheet. I'll leave a link in the description below, and that he has done a bunch of testing on what cards work in what format, and I was quite confident that okay, so I can use my V60s, I've got some V90s, I haven't yet invested in the CF Express Type A cards because I was on the Canon system, so I'm quite heavily invested in the CF Express Type B cards. So I think I can get away with just using my high quality SD cards for a short while. However, if you are only recording to one card and you're already pushing that card quite hard and it's not guaranteed media in this camera, then paranoia and logic suggest to me that the risk of failure goes up. Jumping back between the FX3 and the FX5, it's quite clear that the FX5 is quite a considerable jump up in terms of professional features. It's got a much more video focused layout. It doesn't have some of the photo crossover features that the FX3 has and the others that the Sony Alpha series cameras do. For example, the exposure tools in this camera are amazing, but they're all very professional exposure tools. You've got false colour. I use false colour now to check my exposure. It's got waveform. I've got in the bottom right hand side of my screen here, it's got waveform, love it. What it doesn't have is the FX3 or the A7S3 manual metering numbers at the bottom of your screen. So in your FX3 it's got, you know, 0.0 or plus 1.7. That's the rule of thumb was you've got to overexpose your FX3 plus 1.7. The FX5, to the best of my knowledge, and I've been through this menu multiple times, hasn't got that feature, which is fine because you can learn this camera, but crossing over from an FX3 to an FX5, that's an additional learning step that you might need. Judging by some of the example footage that I've shot so far, I don't think you need to overexpose this camera quite so much. I think it actually benefits from a more even exposure rather than really overexposing it. That might be the raw codec, I'm not quite sure, time will tell. So there's been a lot of talk of the limiting factors of shooting in OpenGate generally, so it knocks out your ability to use any of the active image stabilization options. Also, if you're using OpenGate and you're de-squeezing your image in camera, that also knocks out your image stabilization options and your autofocus. So it seems that there's certain caveats and workarounds that Sony has had to implement to bring OpenGate to the FX5, certainly at this point before any future firmware updates. So that's just a quick update on some real world limitations and caveats and points worth considering if you are thinking of purchasing the FX5, moving over to the FX5 for professional work that you might want to consider. If you are purchasing the FX5 for OpenGate, for its RAW capabilities, just know that you will not be able to dual record in camera in those modes.